Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Francis Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Francis Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's special guest is Jenna Meehan with MEOT, which I absolutely love that name, Jenna. And if you haven't trademarked it, I wanted to recommend that you do, because it's just catchy. I love it. So Jenna, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Jenna Meehan. I have been an occupational therapist for 13 years. My mom is actually an occupational therapist as well. So once I went to work with her and saw what OT is, I knew I wanted to be an occupational therapist. So I've been in OT for 13 years. My practice was started about 2 years ago. About 5 years ago, my own child was diagnosed as autistic, and I had just learned about neurodiversity at that time. And after she received a diagnosis, I kind of just deep dove into reading from the autistic community and learning about neurodiversity, and really then started exploring my own neurodivergence. So then realized I was autistic and ADHD myself and had been masking, and then recognizing a lot of ways that I was supporting people was supporting masking, which was what I had learned to do as myself. So when this all kind of recognized all this, I realized this is not how I want to show up as for myself personally, and then also professionally. So it kind of was during the COVID pandemic break period when it was more isolation and time to kind of reflect. So I explored starting my own practice, and MEOT, thank you. It felt like I like how it sounded, and the sound together. And then also there's a special meaning in it because I have two kids and their first initials are B and E for B, and then our last name is Meehan for M-E, so the B and me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I've been practicing with Be Me for about 2 years, and I'm just kind of growing, exploring how I'm authentically supporting children, families, and adults, and then centering a neurodiversity and disability justice framework, and then what that looks like supporting individual clients, and then also working in our systems for education, health, and our community spaces.
Wow, that is so awesome. Like, so much to unpack in there and so many places to go. I love that you are open about your neurodiversity, because that's like the first thing is that, I know when I was younger, which I'm definitely older than you, I know, it's special ed and neurodiversity, it was like taboo. And now that we're all embracing it so much, I think it just makes us so much better as people, and understanding people's differences. And then being a mom of a neurodiverse child, it's such a different level as well. And I know you get it as a parent, and I get it as a parent when we have neurodiverse children, and how to interact with them. What are your, a lot of my listeners are, families with kids in the school system, and what are ways that OT can support the children in the schools?
Yeah, so I think starting generally what occupational therapy is, and what I try to kind of start with that for families, because I think sometimes it might not be explained, and there kind of can be a generalization, or just, oh, I have someone that I know that worked with an OT and this is what they did. So having kind of just maybe a narrower scope of what OTs can do. But occupational therapists in general are working to support people's occupations. And that means not just jobs with what we sometimes connect occupation to mean, but things that occupy a person's time. So all the things, getting dressed, feeding ourselves, going to school, going to work, having professional and personal relationships, doing things that are bring us joy and pleasure, all the things that we do as human beings. If we're having difficulties, if there is barriers to be able to participate in those things, occupational therapists can evaluate not only what is happening for that person, but also the environment, and then identifying, is there in our systems that have been developed with systemic oppression, identifying, are these things that we can kind of start pushing against, that we can see what kind of modifications, or start teaching our education spaces and public spaces how we can grow in making things more inclusive, so there's not so many barriers for individual people, but then also helping build skills for individuals to be able to access things in a way that is more meaningful for them. So in schools, thinking specifically for autistic, possibly different neurodivergent students, there's a lot of sensory experiences in school. So we have different ways that public schools and private schools and different education spaces have been set up. That there's fluorescent lights, there's loud bells that ring, there's echoey cafeterias that smell like there's all these things that we kind of just are part of our school experience because this is the way they've been set up. But if we start kind of exploring these and recognizing this is a big barrier for a lot of people, and would it maybe even help most people if we changed, could we eat outside, or could figuring out and exploring what barriers are and how things can change. So occupational therapists kind of see the child, see the student, see the space, and kind of look to see where the mismatches are, and then help figure out how to think of accommodations that might fit into that space, talk to teachers and administration about, this might be something that we could explore to just change because it seems like it's not serving a lot of our students. And then also with that work, with advocating, teaching that own student how to advocate for identifying their own needs in spaces, and how can I advocate for things that I need when there is a mismatch.
That is so, thank you. I'm like, oh my gosh, all the years I've been in the profession as a teacher before and everything, this is the first time I've heard occupational therapy defined like that, as the things that occupy your time. And just like, because everybody always, at least I know, most of the people I know confuse OT and PT and physical therapy, and which is which, one's fine motor, one's gross motor, but it's such a difference, the way you explained it, of occupying the time, and it makes sense and it connects. I know, at least here, it's been very challenging to get schools to agree that there's educational impact for children with OT. At least now they're agreeing with the sensory. And so a lot of times, even if they're not eligible for direct services, I can get them to come in and do the sensory. But usually it's just focused on the child and like fidgets, or, the rocking chairs or the things like that. I haven't heard of looking at the environment, which makes sense because so many things that work for our neurodiverse children could work for everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's not it's including our neurodiverse children and not singling anybody out. What difference does it make if we change the fluorescent lights, which set off, I think, epilepsy as well? Like, there's so many other things. They're awful. They're awful lights. And so if we change them, how much would we not need individual education plans as much, because we're changing the full environment? Right. What are some things like that you can think of? I don't know. Sorry, that might be putting you on spot of big things, like if the teacher's listening, because I do have a lot of teachers that listen. What are some little things that they can do in the classroom that could get implemented in general to help everybody?
Yeah, I think when so sorry, I'm going to back up because I like to connect another story with a story. So sorry.
No,
I'm going to try to go back to that. I'm actually, after today, I'm working with I'm in Durham, North Carolina, and we have an amazing program that that empowers our young people to create voting material and trainings and education systems to educate and provide supportive information for voting, and especially for children and young adults. So I'm working with that team, and we're talking through like what might be barriers to those resources, being able to access those resources. So some of the things that have been helpful are kind of thinking over, like, we have gone through their slides and what their resources look like, and then just kind of used a kind of zoomed out lens of trying to look for what might be a barrier for people, and especially people that hold multi-marginalized identities, that are oppressed by financial resources, that might not be able to purchase extra equipment or different things. So we are looking through how someone might be able to read the information. So if there's a lot of slides and a lot of text in something, could we have a more plain language version, or just use more plain language? So for things that are digital, we are trying to have more plain language, some visuals that might just be helpful for people that process things more with more pictures or visual information. And then for people that would like to have more details and more specifics, and like want to read paragraphs to be able to understand it more, have like a hyperlink to be able to like click on or scroll over, that if you're not overwhelmed by that much information and you want to learn more, you have that option. So I think how our design has been is, as our systems have been set up in white supremacy and ableism, we have centered this specific type of brain and body to be the way that this is how we've created things, and changing to a neurodiversity and disability justice centered way of providing spaces. We are thinking, what are the barriers that people in those communities may have, and how can we make that what we're centering when we're developing them first, rather than having that be an accommodation that someone may or not be able to access. So now coming back, sorry, to the classroom.
It's fine.
I think things that we talked about just very quickly: fluorescent lights, like bye, like get rid of, and I know
Right.
that's not something that a teacher may be able to like unplug there, but figuring out, is it possible, and do you have access to natural lighting, and could you turn, for at least part of the day, maybe turn off the lights and have natural lighting? Or is there a corner in the classroom that could be the darker, like, and then having more natural light there? I think the other big thing is there might be students that have different needs. So some children may need bright lights, and fluorescent lights do not bother them. So they might need a lot of lights for them to be able to see, or to be able to process, or to get more visual information to keep them regulated. So I think the flexibility of having maybe sunglasses available, or it's okay to wear your hood or hat if that's helping you blocking out visual stimulation that's too overwhelming. So I think a big piece is thinking through what are options that are just available, that people can just choose to take off and put on as they need it, without being a formal accommodation that someone needs to have written down. Noise canceling headphones or ear pods if it gets too loud, or auditory overstimulating. We talked a little bit about fidgets, being able to access. I always think in my spaces, I always keep gum, because gum to me is so helpful, especially when I'm working and talking. And if I'm in a space where it helps me to sit and to be able to write or something, I need to either fidget with my hands or my mouth. So if I'm writing, then it's my mouth then. So I'm either so yeah, I think those are just some, having flexible seating options. If someone maybe just needs to stand or move or rock, or having rocking chairs, or wiggle cushions, or maybe sitting in a corner so that they can feel kind of secure in getting both sides of the wall kind of pushed against them. I think having that flexibility to be able to have autonomy of your own body, and that you're sharing spaces, that this is a space that's open and here are different ways that you can move. And if it's not working, if what you're doing is then not working for someone else, then we can kind of figure out a different way that maybe the teacher or the OT could help figure out how to make those accommodations. But I think the openness and having the general acceptance of everyone probably is going to need different things when we're working in this classroom, and that's okay.
That is so much came up, and the first thing that triggered is my daughters, and both of my daughters had the same kindergarten teacher, and she was just absolutely amazing, is absolutely amazing. One of the things she did was she had tennis balls on the bottom of all the chairs and desks because that scraping noise. And I don't know if she did, I mean, it could be for her also, but just in general, it just reduced the noise so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you said the corners, my daughter sometimes needs those space corners. And the kindergarten teacher discovered that early. And so she would let my daughter work underneath her desk because that's what she needed. She needed a space where nobody could see her and that she felt tight and secured. So it's interesting that you say that I mean, I guess I do know that it's other people are the same way, but just needing that self-secure place and setting it up is just like, it's having a flexible classroom is what I'm hearing mostly, you know, like seeing what your kids need, maybe even, I mean, I don't know, I'm thinking outside of the box of like, you know, first week of school, having meetings with the class and like, what do you think are some things that we could put in place to help all of us, you know? So it's just kind of a team thing. It isn't like, oh, Johnny has an IEP, so we need to have a quiet corner for him. And Susie needs this, so we need to sit her there. So it's more of a community and inclusive.
Yeah. And I think for some children, like that might be a whole novel idea. Like, oh, I thought school was an adult's going to tell me what to say. I don't, that's a lot of freedom. And so it's amazing, but it's also like so different from, I think, what our school systems have become in kind of this power hierarchy. So I think it could also be such an amazing opportunity to grow in safety and exploration and autonomy of, okay, maybe we're going to try, like, we could have, I know for me, laying on being on the floor feels really good because you're getting so much more proprioception and you can move around and you're not like confined, or you might not like fall off. So, but I don't know, as like a young child, because I was masking so much and I was just trying to follow what someone wanted me to do. And so I think if it was the whole classroom is exploring this and kind of like, if you want to try this, and then you can realize, oh yeah, that did kind of feel good. I was able to read my book for longer when I could move around on the floor, or not feeling like when I'm sitting in a chair, that's another thing, sitting in the chair and I can't have my feet just on the ground because it just feels like my legs are like dangling in something. So I either have to put them up or sit on them. And then when you're like that, you're just wiggling around and the person behind you is getting annoyed. So I think there's so much that I think having your educator and your teacher kind of making that the classroom norms and space that you can explore what feels right for your body, and it's not something that would be shamed or being stigmatized, because we all have different bodies and brains and we're all going to need different things. So it's kind of just starting that process of breaking down what we've created in our society that isn't working.
Right. Yeah. And I know you keep coming back to the masking, and that's been such a big thing now. I've had at a lot of IEP meetings with getting children qualified for special education, because the school's like, well, we don't see any of that in school. And we're like, because they're masking and holding themselves together for 6 hours or 8 hours, whatever the school day is. And then when they come home, they fall apart. And that's what we need to prevent. We want people to be themselves. We want children to be themselves, because if not, what are we creating with society? And we're creating little robots, and that's just smushes everything, like creativity and all the other stuff. And so, like, what if? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you gonna say something?
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm not sure if this is where you're going. I was just gonna go a little bit more into I think so much of where where a disconnect is with that masking, but also right now for OT, we use the sensory processing measure or the sensory profile, which are questionnaires. And typically we might ask a parent or a caregiver to complete one to get the home profile, and then a teacher, maybe multiple teachers, to get a profile of their view of the child's experience. And we don't have really one until a child is an adolescent or adult of their own. So I think that's when you said like we don't see this at school, I think those graphs or those pictures of in the typical range at school and definite difficulty at home are so apparent. And then it becomes, well, this isn't school, this is private therapy. And that's not like, we don't when we are a whole person, and these are the things that our body isn't able to have the skills to feel comfortable and process in a way that feels comfortable for ourselves. This is where we're needing the support. We're just seeing the effects in a space that is more safe for them to be able to express the discomfort. So yeah, I think our school system and our education system, I hope, can really grow in that space, because I think that is getting blocked most frequently. And that conversation and that kind of stop of, this isn't school, this is after school, and it's a separate person, isn't helping anything.
Yeah. And I've gotten that a lot. And I've gotten schools being very, well, that's a home issue. You need to try this, that, and the other, and very accusatory towards my clients. And I mean, there was one meeting that I stood up, I'm like, we will not be putting this all on my clients. And the school realized what they were saying. They're like, no, that's not what we meant. I'm like, well, that's what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is where we are and this is where we need to go. And I think it was eye-opening for the school because they didn't think about it. When you tell families that it's a home problem, not a school problem, what do you think parents are hearing? I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing as a parent. I'm failing my child.
Mm-hmm.
When it's so not that, because it's a whole child. It's, let's see, all of it together. And so what if, like, when you, like, if you see a child that's noticeable, like having more challenges, or it's trackable, and like, the challenges are more so at home or more so at school, or just you're seeing the difference. What is that? Like, what are some things you can do? Like, what do you think parents should be looking for?
Yeah, so I actually had this with my own child, so I think I can kind of start with that example of, so both of my children are autistic. The one masks a lot more, reminds me very much of myself, and they couldn't make the whole day at school. They would come home every day. As soon, like, we walk across the street, our school is very close to us. So as soon as we would cross the street, it would just all come out, and their whole, like, and it just everything. And so I said, I think we can just try to leave early at like 11:30 and see if that helps. And we just started doing that. The school didn't want to do officially that because of, it's a public school, and that
Right.
But I was just like, well, we can't, this isn't working, so we're just gonna leave every day at this time. And that truly helped. And I think just for me, experiencing it as a therapist and also as a parent, and then also having lived experience for my own childhood, my meltdowns would be internal meltdowns, that it would just, everything in my body would shut down and I couldn't do anything. So knowing that I'm seeing this everywhere, and I know it's not something that they're overwhelmed or stressed out at home, because it's not even, we've gotten into the door yet. This is just, they feel finally comfortable and safe, that they have to let go of everything that they've held in for so long. So that was something that we did. I think if that's not an option for a family, and I know that comes with a lot of privilege, if that's a family is not able to pick their child up, or they need the child to be there for the full day because they're working or whatever reason, I think seeing what other spaces you can kind of be curious and explore of, what are the demands being put on this child, and what is the mismatch that it's too much for them, and in what ways can we start lowering that, so they're not having to use more than they have every day, where it just becomes they're needing to melt down just to let go of everything that they're building up. So I think for therapy too, for families that I've been supporting, that this was also a similar thing, and they didn't have the ability to do a half day at school or change as much with school. Thinking about therapy and seeing like, is after school really, is having private therapy after school just another thing that is kind of adding demand? Could we switch to a consultation to see what other ways could we support the being at home, and seeing if there's anything else that we can communicate with the child's teacher, that could brainstorm what other demands riding the school bus that we could see that we could take off the child's plate, because we know it's too much. And so starting to kind of curiously explore what can we remove, because we're seeing that it's too much for this child.
And getting back to the individualization of the IEP, two different clients came up to mind, and one of them, what we did was we gave her 2 resource periods for middle school, because one in the morning and one in the afternoon, because that gave her the 45 minutes to just chill, if that's what she needed, or to catch up on homework if that's what she was okay with. But it was just giving her the time. And another one, we're still working on it, but hopefully we'll get it, of just the prioritizing and scheduling, that we know, if you put math, science, social studies, and he has to keep it together for 3 periods in a row, he's not going to be available for learning by social studies time. Whereas if we put like PE and then math and then maybe art, or, do it sporadically. And, as I'm saying it and thinking about it, I'm like, that should be for all kids though.
Right.
And, right. And I know, trust me, I know for the teachers that are listening, I used to do scheduling, and I was at an alternative middle and high school. So it was even harder because we had fewer staff members, but it's, it's something to take a step back and look at, like, how are we scheduling our children? What are we expecting of our children? And, one of the things I always look back at is like, as adults, what do we do? At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we all need a break. Cup of coffee, go for a walk, whatever it is. It's, the day's long. So what can we put in place for our children that give them that natural break? And I know so many school districts are getting rid of recess, but that's a whole nother thing. Of like, I think middle school and high school should have recess too. Like, have the downtime. It's so important.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the schedule too, I think also thinking through like, oh, my child really likes science, or they really like this, so that's okay. But I think also like it might be thinking through of like, science is right next to the gym, and there's a lot of echoes when I go through that. So I feel like also like thinking through of all the different pieces where we might not recognize, like, oh, going in the gym first thing in the morning when I have a lot and I haven't heard all the echoing yet, I might have enough for this, but having it at the end of the day. So I think that's where it can be really helpful to have a more deeper understanding of the individual child's needs, sensory, socially, physically, the whole child, of what things that we might not have really considered are a barrier, because in the morning it might not affect them as much as it did in the afternoon. So yeah, exactly. I think what you said of really exploring and being curious, and then what can we do as the adults and the education team to provide a plan that has the least amount of barriers and the most support for each child.
Right. And the teacher in me, I'm hearing all the teachers going, are you kidding me? Scheduling's hard enough. How are we going to individualize it? But it's not individualizing. It's like you said, it's just thinking about it, like how we're scheduling things. And it starts with the principal of like when they hire and do breaks and stuff. But it's like to think through the kids, not necessarily having to look at each individual kid, but in general, what do the kids need? As educators, we all have, we know developmental milestones. We know where kids are. Let's really look at those and make sure we're optimizing the use of our time in the school so that our children are fully learning what they're capable of learning and being available.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I know like there's lots of neurodiversity affirming support and stuff. Like, what are some things, like, what does that look like in school?
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm going to come.
That's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, sorry. I like to.
All of our brains work differently. Like, you say it the way you need to say it. It's good.
Yeah, I'm first of all, I'm so excited to like talk about this. I'm really excited, but I also feel super emotionally connected to the projects that I'm working on in our public school. So I'm going to kind of talk about that, and then I can connect it more generally. So in Durham, North Carolina, in Durham Public Schools, we have the Durham Public Schools Foundation. It's a wonderful organization that is doing a lot of great work for equity and just supporting our public school system. So I'm actually co-leading the Alliance for Equitable Disability Inclusion and Education, and that is composed of our EC Director of Durham Public Schools, and then we have Disability Rights NC, ECAC, which are advocacy groups, and then a lot of other disability advocates in our local community. But it's a really unique space because I think typically when disability rights or an advocacy or a lawyer is also with our EC director, it's already in due process, or we don't have that many set spaces that like let's talk, because we all are trying to get to the same thing. So we really have found so much value in this space, and our group is centering disability justice and neurodiversity. So we are actually in the process of applying for grants to fund a disability justice position within the equity department in Durham Public Schools.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's really exciting.
That's awesome.
And so what that could look like is basically connecting our equity department and our EC department with, I don't think is unique to Durham, but I think in a lot of spaces don't have a lot of connection or communication. It's that when there's a child with a disability, or when there's an EC or special disability related issue, it goes to EC, and then if they can't figure it out, it goes, unfortunately, figuring it out through mediation or due process. And there hasn't been a lot of connection of the equity piece in it, and specifically students who are multi-marginalized. So the only data that we had that we could find when we were writing this was the suspension rate for disabled and Black and Brown students. And that is a very shocking statistic in itself, but there's so many other pieces of how are we not centering neurodiversity and disability justice. So having this position and kind of doing the work to figure out how this could look has been really exciting. So some of the projects that we're thinking about doing are, we've had presentations with our Board of Ed and our superintendent to talk about kind of moving from a disability rights, which is the system that we've been in, to shifting to disability justice, and how that is centering neurodiversity and also the intersection of disability as an intersection, as well as all other identities that have been oppressed and that are marginalized. So we are currently working on a grant that is going to have disability justice ambassadors that are going to be supported by stipends through the DPS Foundation. And then these ambassadors are going to be supported and doing trainings about disability justice and neurodiversity affirming work, and then picking a project that they want to bring to their schools or the system or space that they're in, and kind of sharing it. So we have book clubs that we're thinking about, trainings. We have a kind of a running list that we've already kind of started to create. But I think our biggest piece that is our first step is really understanding how to connect EC and equity, because there is such an obvious strong connection that has been siloed for so long. So bringing the awareness and how to bridge those two things so that our students with disability are also part of our intentional equity work that our schools are working really hard to do.
And when you say EC, what is that abbreviation for?
I'm in North Carolina, okay. So we use the term EC, or exceptional children's for.
Got it.
Sorry, yes, I forgot that's North Carolina.
Thank you. No, and it's so funny how it's all changed because like it used to be ESE, exceptional student education. You know, like it's changed so much and it's so different. So thank you for clarifying that, exceptional children. But it's, you know, like it's interesting, like our society, like starting to include and include and include, which I love and is great. It is, you know, like we just finally like, you know, working it and pulling in the disability. I don't know. I'm just thinking like, I wish we would just like, we're all people, but there needs to be, I mean, there needs to be this equity in bringing it in because like, you know, like, yes, it's supposed to be an individual education plan, but we shouldn't be all right, I can't get the word out. So, these people out, like, you know what I mean? These children shouldn't be like put out on their own. You know, like they should be included, and it's all inclusivity. And inclusivity is so much more than just putting them in a gen ed classroom. It's like, let's get the gen ed classroom in a way that all of the students feel part of the classroom. You know, get the right books in place, get the right everything. And then with training, like, of course, I'm, you know, the teacher in me, and I know all the teachers going, great, more training. What do we need more training for? But if the training's right, and like, I like the book club, you know, that it's just more of an interactive training, it can help make everybody's life so much easier because then you don't have to think of this stuff.
Right. And I think that's where it kind of is as we're doing, I think, social justice work, it's really such shifting work of we need to unlearn so much of the things that we've learned because we've learned in systems that have upheld these ableist and racist and all these things. So much is, yes, I could do this thing and that would maybe not do this, but unless I'm really understanding and kind of shifting more and understanding the ways that we are all, each of us, upholding these systems, it's not going to really shift in the way that's going to include everyone, because the people that are in the most oppressed and oppressive spaces. So that's why I think disability justice, there's the 10 principles that really help clearly define what it means and what the framework is. But one is that we are moving together, and we are all individuals with our own identities, but what we're shifting in the systems is acceptance and value and welcomeness for everyone. So I think that kind of shift from where current school systems are is pretty big. So I think the work is work that kind of is incremental, that needs to kind of move at a pace that we can start opening, rather than just making maybe smaller changes that are still going to not be equitable for most students.
Right. And so what does that look like in school? Like, so what can schools do? You know, and I think we touched on a lot of this, like, you know, with get rid of fluorescent lights. Do you hear that, everyone? Get rid of fluorescent lights. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but maybe in the new buildings that they're building, they'll get rid of them because they're not good on so many other levels as well. But like, I guess more of what are some IEP goals? Because I know that's a big thing that schools sometimes ask parents. Like, I know I've had this before, is like the school will be like, well, what goals are you looking for when we're talking about eligibility? And when I was able to, or my clients were able to articulate what goals we're looking for, it's amazing how the school's like, oh, okay, and agreeable. Yeah. So are there like goals and accommodations in general that you could recommend?
Yeah, so I think kind of going to that, what we were talking about, the principle of first what neurodiversity means is that all brains are different, neurobrain diversity different. So all brains are different. So if we are having a neurodiversity affirming framework, that is just a foundational piece that we are believing that all brains are different and there isn't one way that's a good brain or not a good brain, that we know everyone needs different things. So kind of our focus of how we've learned to write goals and how we've learned is that in a medical model, there is a right kind of brain. And if you have a different type of brain, then you need to have these things. So I think it's tricky because I think our education system is still using those definitions. So I think is challenging to be able to use neurodiversity affirming language in a way that's also qualifying for the need in a system that uses different language. But I think overall, I think neurodiversity affirming goals can look like what are ways that can be supporting a student for their individual strengths, and also in a way that they're able to be themselves, and not so things that are not neurodiversity affirming, eye contact, forcing the
Right.
child to make eye contact. We're not, so I think maybe that might be a better way to start off. So things that are setting that this is how we're expecting children to be seated on the rug, crisscross applesauce. They should be looking with their eyes at the teacher. They can't move their hands. They have quiet hands. I think all of those things we have learned are ableist because they are assuming that there is a right way that you should be. So
Yeah.
those would not be neurodiversity affirming. So instead, I think we can think of this child, their brain needs to have something that they're moving and to be able to attend and listen. But the child, also a child in the classroom, gets really distracted when there's a lot of movement. So we could figure out, okay, the child can one child be in a different part of the classroom, or can we figure out, can this child be wearing a hat, figuring out what kind of accommodations depending on how shared space looks like. But I think when we use that general framework of, we're not trying to have a child or a student act like what we've learned is the typical student, and what would be considered the way we've learned, sitting still, facing the teacher. All those things do not work for everyone, and I think that's like a principle of neurodiversity affirming. So with that, as we're thinking about how to support a child, if our goals start following that, I think we need to stop and then step back of, this is not where we're trying to go. How can we support the child in a way that they can feel themselves, and the way that get what they need in a way that is not is a way that everyone can share the space in the classroom.
Right. Get out of our old school thinking, because if you look at it as careers and jobs as adults, how many professions are truly sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, doing one thing? Not a lot, and so why are we expecting that of our children?
Right.
That we all learn differently 100%. I mean, I'm thinking back to high school, way back. And there was a student on my softball team. And I remember we were reading about something. I don't even remember what it was, but we're in the locker room and she was just sitting there rocking. And everybody's looking at her like she's wackadoodle. And she's like, I can't concentrate unless I'm moving. And that's what worked for her. And I love that she was open to it and was able to express that. And I'm thinking like outside of the box again of IEP goals, of helping the child identify what they need to be successful. And I think you said it before, to advocate for themselves. But a lot of times, especially when we're talking about our younger children, they might not know what they need. Whereas if we help them identify what they need, then they're able to ask for it. And what a different world it would be for them.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just said. I think so. Sorry, there was a lot of things. I think, I think kind of going back to thinking about myself as a child, and just how I was constantly scanning things and just tried to do what I thought was making everyone else happy. So there was never a reflection of, do I like this, or does this feel good to me, or is this uncomfortable? It was just, looking back at childhood, I've realized I was just uncomfortable all the time, and I didn't know what was making me uncomfortable. It was just because I didn't even have that self-awareness to, or think it was a valid thing to, what do I want? Because I thought I was just supposed to make all the other people comfortable and happy around me. And so I think so much, I don't know if that's the experience for every child, but I think I don't think I would have ever been identified as a child that needed more support, or needed, because I, was very people pleasing and did all the things. But how that really affected me was something that I needed to deal with after. And I think being able to explore the things and giving kids that just made me think of like, even just a child saying, no, I don't want to do this, can be very triggering for adults. Or like when a teacher has all these children in a classroom and we just need to get outside, we don't have that much time, we need to go to art or wherever, whatever they're doing, we're putting so much pressure and demands on teachers and educators that it's not fair at all, and not right, and not sustainable. But then when that gets pressure, then we're pushing it down on the child that just has to, whatever they are saying, no, I'm not comfortable, or no, I can't do this, or no, I'm not ready. They're the last ones that kind of have to just get pushed through. So I think also figuring out how are we responding when a child is sharing their needs or saying this is what they are able to do right now, and how are we able to kind of grow in that? Because I think if we don't have the capability to support autonomy for children, we're teaching them that you don't have autonomy, and then figuring what that looks like later on when a child doesn't know how to express themselves or advocate. There can be a lot of situations where that can be really unsafe, or a lot of things.
Yeah, no, and that makes so much sense. It's just like, why is the child saying no? Because that's, but the why is so important in so many things with education, because as children, like, as you said, you masked all the time to be a people pleaser. As children, I think naturally most children are people pleasers. But so if they're saying no, there's a reason, there's something behind there, and being able to find out. And as you said, I know teachers are overwhelmed, they've got too much and so much, but like maybe we need to get more behavior support into the classrooms, and more, extra aids into the classroom, to give the teachers the support where they need, but also to give the children the support, and to minimize the demands. All I know is that as good as our education system is in the States, it's still got a long way to go, and we do need some changes. But I mean, like, that's part of the reason for the show also, is like letting parents know, like, hey, these are some ideas. Here's what's out there. Here's what you can do. Here's some recommendations. Like, no, you don't have to hire an attorney. No, you don't have to hire an advocate all the time, or private, people. But like, here are some different things that you can do. But you can also consult outside people to help you plan for inside, because it's hard. Like, we all know it takes a village to raise a family. We all know that. But it's, there's that meme out there. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but like, it takes a village, everybody says it takes a village to raise a family. What does that mean? Do they just show up? Is there a number we call? Like, it's been 21 years and I haven't seen my village. Well, it's, no, we need to create our village and see what's out there, see who's out there. And so, like, God, this has been so awesome and so wonderful. It's like got my brain going all over the place with things we need to do. So if people want to get in touch with you, like want to learn more about what you're doing in North Carolina or privately, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. So my website is BMEOT. I was going to spell it and then I got confused. So BEMEOT.com. And then if you want to email me, it's Jenna, JENNA @BMeOT.com. And then also another organization that I co-lead is called All Neurotypes. And we're also in North Carolina. And we have trainings, neurodiversity affirming trainings for all different community members. We have a YouTube channel. We have created a disability justice centered summer camp that we're hoping to grow. And then we also offer adult neurodivergent affirming discussion groups that are available on Zoom that anyone is welcome to email us and we can add you to the list. So that is allneurotypes.com. And the email for that one is hello, HELLO @allneurotypes.com.
That is awesome. And we're going to have all the links in the show notes below. This has been so wonderful and so educational, Jenna. Thank you so much for being on the show and letting us all know what else is out there for people.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really great.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.